The toughest rule in Grandma's house was about medicine. She forbade all modern treatments from the very beginning. I was 15 when we moved in after Mom's car accident. With Dad gone for years, it was just me, my 12-year-old sister Lila, and Grandma in that creaky old house. The ban on medicine took effect immediately. Grandma threw away Lila's inhaler and even the fluoride toothpaste. Doctors can't be trusted, she said. Mom's death was God's punishment for relying on them. Only faith and prayer can heal. When Lila wheezed at night, Grandma rubbed eucalyptus oil on her chest and told her to pray harder. Lila's asthma could have landed her in the ER, but Grandma swore her mysterious teas would cure everything. She made us drink them under her watchful eye, never revealing the ingredients. Sometimes Lila's breathing worsened after the teas, wheezing more than before. That's normal, Grandma insisted. The medicine is working, Kyle. You'll see. I hid one of Lila's emergency inhalers in a hole I cut in my mattress. Some nights, when her breathing got really bad, especially after drinking whatever herbs Grandma had boiled, I'd sneak into her room and give her a couple of puffs, just enough to stop the wheezing without Grandma noticing she was better. Lila believed the eucalyptus was finally working. I let her think that. If she knew about the inhaler, she might accidentally tell Grandma. The guilt of lying to her ate at me, but it wasn't as sharp as the fear of watching her suffocate in her sleep. The real trouble came when Lila got strep throat. Her fever climbed to 103, and white patches coated her throat. Half her class had it, so I knew it was strep. Grandma made her gargle with salt water and put onions in her socks. It's just the toxins leaving your body, she said. For 3 days, Lila got worse. She stopped eating because swallowing hurt too much. Her lips cracked and bled from dehydration. She couldn't even cry anymore. There wasn't enough fluid in her body to make tears. I stayed up all night under my blanket, phone in hand, Googling death from untreated strep throat, reading about rheumatic fever and kidney failure. I couldn't sit there and watch my sister die from something 10 days of antibiotics would fix. I slipped into Grandma's room while she was at church, quietly opening her purse. I took $20, careful not to make a sound, and set out on the 4-mile walk to the urgent care clinic. I planned to tell them I had strep symptoms and pay the fee with Grandma's money. The doctor barely looked at Lila's throat before prescribing amoxicillin. My heart pounded the whole time as I picked up the prescription at the pharmacy. I knew if Grandma ever found out, nothing would be the same. The pharmacist asked if I had any questions about the medication. I almost laughed. I'd spent hours researching dosages, side effects, everything. No, I'm fine, I said, clutching the bag as if it were the most dangerous thing in the world. That night, I crushed the pills and mixed them into Lila's soup. It's a new herb Grandma wants you to try, I told her. She took a bite, trusting me, and I held my breath. After 2 days, her fever finally broke. 4 days in, she could swallow again. After a week, she was completely better, asking for seconds at dinner, singing in the shower, laughing in a way that made the house feel alive again. Grandma praised God for the miracle. See, she said, doctors are unnecessary. Prayer is enough. I tried to keep my relief quiet, but inside I felt like I'd carry the world on my shoulders. I thought I'd gotten away with it, until Grandma found the pill bottle in my backpack while looking for her missing $20. She stood in my doorway, holding it like it was a bag of poison. Her face was purple with rage, and her hands trembled as she read the label over and over. Lila peeked from behind her, finally healthy, finally able to breathe, swallow, and laugh again. You poisoned your sister with this filth, Grandma said, voice deadly quiet. You brought Satan's chemicals into my home. You stole from me to buy it. I wanted to scream, to tell her I'd saved Lila's life, that she would have died from strep throat because of Grandma's insane beliefs. But I just sat on my bed, heart hammering, knowing exactly what was coming. We had nowhere else to go. No family, no money. This house was all we had. I'm calling social services, Grandma said, pulling out her phone. I'll tell them you're giving your sister dangerous substances without consent, stealing money, endangering a child. She started dialing. They'll put you in juvenile detention and Lila in foster care. At least then she'll be safe from you. Lila started crying, pleading with Grandma. Please don't call. I feel better. Kyle helped me. Grandma didn't listen. She was already talking to someone on the phone, using words like dangerous, unauthorized medication, and immediate removal. I looked at Lila, eyes wide and mouthed. Pack your stuff. I knew we had maybe 10 minutes before our lives exploded. Either we went into the system separately, or we ran away together with whatever we could fit in our backpacks. Either way, homelessness awaited us because I couldn't let my sister die in a house where antibiotics were considered evil. Grandma was giving our address to whoever was on the phone, and Lila froze in the hallway. I realized right then that I had to choose, right now, whether to run or let them take us. Outside, I could already hear sirens wailing. I jumped off my bed and grabbed Lila's hand, pulling her into our room while Grandma's voice grew louder on the phone. She was shouting about theft and how I'd been giving Lila dangerous drugs without permission. My hand shook as I yanked open Lila's dresser and started shoving clothes into her backpack. Lila stood frozen, her eyes wide, unsure what was happening. "Kyle, what's going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to pack. Right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Things are about to get really bad, Lila. Just trust me." The sirens outside grew louder and louder, then suddenly stopped right in front of our house. My stomach dropped as I ran to the window. 2 police cars and an ambulance were parked on our street, their lights flashing, reflecting off the walls of our house. Lila came up behind me, tears running down her cheeks. Are we going to jail for the medicine?" I grabbed her shoulders firmly, looking into her eyes. "No, Lila. Stay calm. We'll just tell them the truth, all right? Everything will be fine. Just breathe." A loud knock rattled the front door. Grandma's footsteps pounded toward it, and her voice carried through the house as she immediately started telling the officers that I'd been drugging my sister. 2 police officers came inside, one asking where we were. Grandma pointed down the hallway, and they walked toward us, EMS following closely behind. The first officer was tall, with gray hair, and he spoke in a calm but firm voice. "We need to talk to you separately," he said. He asked me to come with him to the living room while his partner took Lila to the kitchen. The EMS team went with her, asking if she felt okay. I could hear her answers small and weak, but she tried to reassure them. The officer sat on Grandma's couch and pulled out a small notebook. "Can you tell me about the medication your grandmother mentioned?" he asked. I took a deep breath. Lila had strep throat. Her fever hit 103 degrees, and there were white patches all over her throat. She couldn't swallow. She couldn't even cry. I paused, trying to steady my voice. She was so dehydrated. Her lips were bleeding. I couldn't watch her suffer like that. He scribbled furiously, then asked, "Where did you get the antibiotics?" I swallowed hard. I had took $20 from Grandma's purse and went to urgent care. Grandma stormed over and shoved the prescription bottle at him like it was evidence of a crime. From the kitchen, I suddenly heard Lila wheezing badly. That terrifying tight sound that meant she couldn't get enough air. I heard the EMS team asking Grandma for Lila's rescue inhaler, and she snapped, "I don't believe in those things. Prayer is enough. There's one in the hole I cut in my mattress." I yelled, my voice shaking. The officer looked at me, surprised, but one of the paramedics ran to my room. I heard him coming back and giving Lila the inhaler. "Take slow, deep breaths, Lila," he said gently. Grandma started yelling, "You're poisoning her with chemicals. Prayer will work better." After a few minutes, I could finally hear Lila breathing normally again instead of that awful wheezing. The paramedic asked her if she'd been having trouble breathing for a while, and I heard her whisper yes. He sounded concerned as he wrote on his clipboard. About an hour later, a woman arrived, carrying a briefcase and wearing a gray suit. She introduced herself. "I'm Maya Harrison from Social Services. I need to talk to all of you." She started with Lila, taking her into the dining room while I waited in the kitchen with the officer. Grandma paced back and forth in the living room, muttering prayers and saying we betrayed her. I could hear Maya's calm voice asking Lila questions, but I couldn't make out the answers. After about 30 minutes, Maya came to get me. We sat at the dining room table. "Can you tell me about your living situation since your mom died in the accident?" she asked. I told her everything. How Grandma had thrown away Lila's inhaler the day we moved in, about the mysterious teas she made us drink, and how they often made Lila worse. I explained how I had snuck into Lila's room at night with a hidden inhaler to keep her alive. Maya wrote everything down quietly, never looking upset or surprised. She asked for more details about specific times Lila had gotten sick. I told her about other kids at school having strep and how I knew Lila had it too. "Would you show me the house?" she asked. Grandma had no choice but to let us. We walked through every room. Maya photographed everything with her phone. Religious pamphlets about faith healing stacked on tables, the cabinet full of herbs, oils, and mysterious dried plants. I pointed out the trash from where Grandma had thrown Lila's preventive asthma medications. Maya found more pamphlets claiming modern medicine was evil and took pictures of those too. I couldn't understand it. Why did Grandma call the authorities on herself when she was the one refusing medical care for a sick child? She was basically saying, "Come look at how I won't let this kid have medicine." Grandma followed us around, insisting she was protecting us from pharmaceutical demons that wanted to poison our bodies. After Maya had seen everything and talked to everyone for about 2 hours, she stepped aside to make a phone call. When she returned, her expression was calm but serious. "I'm calling for emergency removal from the home," she said. Denying necessary medical care to a child counts as neglect under state law. With Lila's documented asthma and her recent strep infection, it isn't safe for you to stay here anymore. Grandma exploded, screaming about religious persecution and how the government was attacking her faith. Maya didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone and started making calls to arrange a place for us to stay for the night. Go pack some clothes and essentials for a few days, she said. I'll work things out with my supervisor. Lila grabbed my arm so tight her nails dug in, and I whispered over and over, we'll stay together no matter what happens. Nothing can separate us. We rushed to our room and started throwing clothes into our backpacks. Grandma stayed in the living room, alternately crying and shouting Bible verses at Maya. I grabbed Lila's toothbrush and the book she'd been reading, stuffing them in her bag along with her favorite stuffed bear she still slept with. After about 20 minutes, Maya came back to check on us. She helped Lila zip up her overstuffed backpack, then motioned for us to follow her to the car. One of the officers stayed with Grandma, still standing rigid in the living room. As soon as Maya started driving, Lila completely fell apart. She sobbed, asking, is this my fault? Did I ruin everything by getting sick? Is it because of my asthma? I pulled her against me in the back seat, holding her tight. None of this is your fault, I said. Keeping you healthy isn't wrong. Medicine isn't evil. You deserve to breathe, to live without pain. Maya glanced in the rearview mirror. Lila deserved proper medical care. No child should have to suffer when treatment exists, she said gently. We drove for about 15 minutes before pulling up to a large house. From the outside, it looked like someone's regular home, but Maya explained it was an emergency shelter for kids. The intake worker who met us looked tired, but her smile was warm as she handed us forms and explained the rules. Curfew at 9 p.m., no leaving without permission, and mandatory check-ins every 4 hours. It felt strange signing forms about where we could and couldn't go, like we were checking into some kind of minimum security prison. But at least Lila's asthma medications were on their approved list, and that alone gave me some relief. They gave us a room with 2 beds and a small dresser. That first night, Lila pulled out her inhaler without looking over her shoulder or trying to muffle the sound. She took deep, full breaths, and for the first time in months, she wasn't wheezing when she lay down to sleep. I stayed awake listening to her breathe normally, realizing this was what regular medical care looked like, what kids were supposed to have. The next morning, a nurse came to do full medical evaluations on both of us. She checked our height and weight, asked about our medical history, and carefully documented everything. Lila got a brand new inhaler with a spacer attachment that helped her use it properly, along with an asthma action plan detailing exactly what to do if she had an attack. The nurse looked shocked when Lila admitted she hadn't seen a real doctor since Mom died over a year ago. That's far too long without proper care, she said, writing notes about follow-up appointments with specialists. Maya visited that afternoon to explain what would happen next. There will be a court hearing in a few weeks to determine where you two will live permanently, she said. She had already started trying to find Dad, but his last phone number was disconnected, and the last known address she had for him was outdated. You don't have any other relatives nearby, she added. It's likely you'll stay in foster care until the court decides what's best. She asked me to sign papers acknowledging that I had taken $20 from Grandma and given Lila prescription medication without guardian consent. These facts will come up in court, she said, but I will argue that you were protecting Lila from medical neglect. I nodded, understanding that the theft charge would still make me look bad in front of the judge, even if my intentions were good. 2 days later, they arranged a supervised phone call with Grandma. The moment she picked up, she started crying and quoting Bible verses. You must honor your elders, she said. Foster care will corrupt your souls. Grandma kept yelling through the supervised phone call, saying we betrayed her and Mom's memory by choosing chemicals over faith. I barely recognized Lila when she hung up first, not even saying goodbye. 3 days later, a counselor named Iris Lopez came to help us enroll in the local public school. She set up meetings with teachers, making sure they understood our situation. She arranged for the school nurse to keep Lila's rescue inhaler in her office and taught her how to recognize asthma triggers during school hours. Lila's excitement surprised me. I get to have it here, she asked, holding the inhaler like it was the most precious thing in the world. Yes, I said, smiling. You can use it any time you need. Back at the shelter, I couldn't stop thinking about just grabbing Lila and running away somewhere we could disappear and start over. But there were cameras in every hallway and strict sign-out procedures. Maya had warned me that if we ran, they'd definitely separate us when we got caught. So we followed every rule, went to every appointment, and waited for our court date. While Lila learned what it felt like to breathe freely, I learned what it felt like not to spend every night terrified that she might suffocate in her sleep. 3 days later, Maya showed up at the shelter carrying a thick folder and looking exhausted. She pulled me aside while Lila was in art therapy and spread the papers on the cracked plastic table in the meeting room. I've been trying to track down your dad for days, she said, tapping the folder. Calling old numbers, checking addresses from court records. Turns out he's living in Colorado with a new wife and 2 kids under 5. I frowned. He hasn't contacted us. No, Maya said. The child support office marked him uncollectible because he hasn't paid anything in 3 years and keeps changing jobs to avoid wage garnishment. But this actually helps our case. It proves Grandma was your only family option when your mom died. I've already filed paperwork showing your dad isn't a placement option and wouldn't even return calls about you. 2 weeks passed, and Lila had her first real test at the school. They were running laps in PE when Lila started wheezing badly, her face turning red as she pushed herself to keep up with the other kids. The teacher noticed immediately and walked her to the nurse's office, where they gave her the rescue inhaler we'd registered. That afternoon, Lila came home bouncing with excitement. Kyle, you won't believe it. The nurse let me sit for 10 minutes until my breathing was normal again, and then sent me back to class like nothing happened, she said, eyes wide. I smiled, relief washing over me. See? That's what medicine is supposed to do, I said. I can't believe how fast it worked, she said, shaking her head. Grandma's herbs never helped at all. The state assigned me a therapist who worked with kids in the system. Our first session was in a small office that smelled like old coffee and printer ink. I sat on the worn couch, picking at a loose thread while she asked about everything that had happened with Grandma. What scared you the most about all this? She asked. I swallowed and admitted, it's not getting in trouble for the stolen money or the antibiotics. It's the thought of being separated from Lila. She nodded and helped me write a statement for court that focused on Lila's medical needs and how I was just trying to keep her alive. A week later, Maya called with news about a potential placement. A woman named Olivia Scott has space for both of you, she said. She's fostered siblings before, so she understands how important it is to stay together. We met Olivia briefly at the social services office. She looked tired, but smiled when Lila showed her a drawing from art therapy. How's her asthma? She asked immediately. She's been having trouble because of her living situation, Maya explained. Olivia nodded. I've raised 2 kids with asthma. I know all about nebulizers, peak flow meters, action plants. We'll be fine. When Maya asked if she had concerns about taking us, Olivia just shrugged. Keeping kids healthy and safe, that's the whole point, she said. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. A week before that, Maya brought us a letter from Grandma. Her handwriting was shaky, and she wrote that she'd agreed to let us use modern medicine if we came home, that she'd been praying, and maybe God worked through doctors sometimes too. Maya explained it wasn't that simple. The court would need Grandma to complete parenting classes, attend therapy, and prove she could follow medical advice consistently. When Maya called Grandma to explain the requirements, we could hear her yelling through the phone, I'm not going to let the government tell me how to raise children. Maya hung up and made notes in our file that Grandma was refusing all remediation services. That night at the shelter, Lila sat on my bed and asked quietly, Kyle, why didn't you ever tell me about the inhaler in your mattress? Her voice was soft, but I could tell she was hurt. I was scared. I admit it. What if you said something to Grandma during one of her prayer sessions, or while she was rubbing oils on your chest? I just couldn't risk it. Lila hugged me tightly. I understand why you did it, she said, but I could see the wetness in her eyes. I knew she felt betrayed, that I hadn't trusted her enough to tell her the truth. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over what Maya had coached me to say. Stick to the facts about Lila's medical conditions. Don't get emotional about Grandma's beliefs. I practiced in a bathroom mirror, explaining how Lila's fever hit 103 with strep, how she couldn't swallow or cry, how her asthma made her wheeze every single night. Something about Grandma's sudden change of heart didn't sit right. Her letter made it seem like she was willing to compromise on medicine now that she'd lost control. The timing felt desperate, like she was trying to get them back rather than truly changing her beliefs. Maya reassured me that the judge had seen hundreds of medical neglect cases and would understand. Still, my hand shook every time I imagined testifying against Grandma. The courthouse was smaller than I expected, a regular building downtown with metal detectors and tired-looking security guards. We sat on hard-wooden benches outside the courtroom while Maya reviewed our case with the state's attorney. When they finally called us in, the judge was already reading through a stack of medical records and the EMT reports from the night Lila first got sick. Grandma sat at a table with her lawyer, wearing her best church dress and clutching her Bible. Her lawyer started arguing about religious freedom, but the judge cut him off after maybe 5 minutes. Religious beliefs don't override a child's right to necessary medical care, he said firmly. When they called me to testify, my legs felt like jelly walking to the witness stand. The judge asked me about the hidden inhaler and the antibiotics. My voice cracked as I explained how I had to sneak medicine to Lila in the middle of the night just so she could breathe. Why didn't you report the situation earlier? The judge asked. I swallowed hard. We had nowhere else to go. Grandma was all we had after Mom died. The judge nodded like he'd heard that excuse before. They called Lila next, and watching my 12-year-old sister climb into the witness chair made my chest tighten. She whispered her answers about not being able to breathe at night and how the herb teas had made her worse instead of better. When the prosecutor asked if she wanted to go back to Grandma's house, Lila looked straight at Grandma and said, "Not if it meant not having my inhaler." Grandma started sobbing loudly, and her lawyer asked for a recess, but the judge said we needed to finish Lila's testimony first. Lila answered a few more questions about the herbs and teas, her voice growing stronger as she described how much better she felt after the medicine I'd given her. The prosecutor thanked her, and she climbed down from the witness stand, coming straight to sit next to me and grabbing my hand tightly. The judge shuffled through more papers while Grandma's lawyer tried to argue about how loving and caring she was, but the judge just shook his head repeatedly. After what felt like forever, he finally looked up and said he was ready to make his ruling. "Medical neglect is clear," he said. "These children cannot return to Grandma's care right now." He ordered us to stay in foster placement with a woman named Olivia, whom Maya had found, someone who'd already passed all the background checks and home study requirements. Grandma could have supervised visits if she completed a medical education course and went to family therapy, but she would have to prove she understood why medicine was necessary. Before the judge even finished speaking, Grandma stood up and walked out, slamming the doors so hard the bay rattled. Maya drove us straight to Olivia's house that same afternoon. I kept glancing at Lila in the back seat to make sure she was okay. Olivia met us at the door, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who smiled but didn't try to hug us or do anything weird. She showed us to our room, and I couldn't believe it had 2 actual beds, not just a bed and a couch like at the shelter. There was a desk by the window and a closet with hangers already in it. She even pointed to the bathroom cabinet where she kept things like Tylenol and Band-Aids and said we never had to ask permission to use them if we were hurt or sick. Lila immediately took her inhaler out of her pocket and set it on the nightstand between our beds, right out in the open where anyone could see it. The first few days at Olivia's house felt strange because we kept waiting for rules about prayer time or special teas, but she just asked, "Do you want pizza or pasta for dinner?" About a week later, Maya called to say Grandma had signed up for her required classes and that we'd have our first supervised visit soon. The visit was at a community center, and when we walked in, Grandma was already there with a plastic bag. She pulled out a bottle of holy water and started trying to bless Lila's inhaler. "I'm combining faith with medicine," she said, smiling like it made sense. Lila pulled her inhaler away, but Grandma grabbed it back and started pouring oils on it. "This will help the medicine work better," she said. The supervisor, some guy with a clipboard, stepped in. "You can't put substances on medical equipment," he said firmly. Grandma argued, "Olive oil is natural and godly." The supervisor took the inhaler and went to wash it off while Lila started wheezing from the stress. After that disaster, we didn't see Grandma for a while and settled into normal life at Olivia's house. She helped us figure out routines, homework right after school, then chores, then free time before bed. She took Lila to a special lung doctor who did all kinds of breathing tests and adjusted her medicines. The doctor gave Lila a new inhaler for daily use, kept the old one just for emergencies, and prescribed some pills she had to take at night. For the first time since moving in with Grandma, Lila went a whole week without wheezing even once, not even when she ran up the stairs. At school, Iris would find me in the hallway every Monday to check how things were going. My grades started improving because I wasn't staying up all night listening for Lila's breathing or sneaking her medicine. Lila joined the art club and made friends with kids who didn't know anything about Grandma or foster care or any of our mess. She came home talking about her friend Amelia's birthday party or how her art teacher said she had real talent. Maya visited one afternoon and told us Grandma had started the required parenting classes but walked out of her first therapy session after 10 minutes. She had to complete both things to get unsupervised visits, which meant we wouldn't see her alone anytime soon. Part of me felt relieved, but another part felt sad because Grandma was choosing her beliefs over us again. 2 months after moving in with Olivia, Lila had her first bad asthma attack at the house. She'd been playing outside and came in gasping, her lips turning that scary blue color. Olivia didn't panic at all when Lila's asthma flared up. She got her sitting up straight and handed her the rescue inhaler. "Deep breaths, Lila. Just like we practiced," she said calmly while dialing the doctor's emergency line. She followed the action plan the doctor had written out, timing the inhaler puffs and checking Lila's breathing. Within 20 minutes, Lila was back to normal. Olivia shrugged and made us all hot chocolate like it was no big deal. "See? No drama," she said, smiling. She didn't make Lila feel guilty for having an attack or say she should have been more careful. A few weeks later, Maya called to say Grandma had finally completed enough of her requirements for another supervised visit. This time we met at a park, and Grandma looked older somehow, like she'd shrunk a little. She asked about school and didn't mention God, prayer, or herbs once. Lila proudly showed her a painted wooden box she'd made, and Grandma actually smiled. "That's pretty," she said. "No blessing, no oils, nothing." The therapist Maya had found for me was a younger guy who didn't make me lie on a couch or anything like in the movies. We just sat in regular chairs and talked. After a few sessions, I told him about the guilt I felt for lying to Lila about the inhaler. "You protected her," he said simply. "That doesn't make you bad, even if you had to break rules or take the $20 to do it." We worked through the anger I felt toward Grandma for almost letting Lila die, and toward Dad for leaving us with no options. Slowly, the guilt about that $20 faded, because it literally saved Lila's life. Then one day, Maya showed up with papers saying Dad had finally responded to the court stuff. He was officially giving up his parental rights, signing that he didn't want custody of us. I felt a sharp ache seeing it in writing, realizing he really didn't want us. Maya reassured me, "This actually works in your favor. You won't be forced to live with him and his new family." Olivia had already started filing paperwork to make herself our long-term foster placement, which meant we could stay with her until we turned 18 if everything worked out. 3 months later, Maya drove us to the Children's Hospital for Lila's lung function tests. I watched as the technician hooked her up to a machine with tubes while Lila breathed into it, following instructions on a computer screen. The results came back showing major improvement from her baseline test they'd done when we first moved in with Olivia. The doctor pointed out a few areas on the scan showing scarring from years of untreated asthma attacks, but when he said Lila could live a totally normal life with her medications, she started crying. I had to look away because seeing her that happy made my chest hurt in a good way. The doctor printed out the results and gave Lila a copy to keep. She held onto those papers the whole ride home like they were made of gold. That weekend, a package arrived addressed to Lila with no return address. When she opened it, there was a birthday card from Grandma with a $20 bill folded inside. Lila read the note aloud. She says she's been praying for us every day and going to grief counseling twice a week to work through Mom's death properly. I frowned slightly. It didn't mention wanting us back or telling us to come home. "That's different," I said quietly. Lila shrugged, tucking the card on her bedroom wall next to her inhaler. "Progress, I guess," she said, dropping the $20 into a piggy bank Olivia had given her. A few weeks later at school, Lila's art teacher entered her painting of a girl breathing in clouds into the district contest. When the principal announced over the intercom that Lila had won first place for her grade, I was sitting in math class and had to put my head down on my desk because I was so proud. I couldn't stop thinking about Grandma trying to pour holy water and oils on Lila's inhaler during their supervised visit. Is she really understanding what the judge told her about mixing faith with medical care, or is she just pretending to comply while still doing dangerous things? Iris came to find me after class and took a picture of me and Lila holding the painting for our case file. Lila explained to everyone who asked that she could paint steady lines now because she wasn't shaking from trying to breathe. The painting went up in the main hallway display case, and every time I walked past it, I remembered those nights when she couldn't even hold a pencil steady. Maya came for her monthly visit and sat us down at Olivia's kitchen table with a bunch of paperwork about permanency planning. "If reunification with Grandma isn't going to happen," she said, "Olivia has already said she'd be open to adoption." The word adoption made my head spin because it meant we'd have a real legal home forever, not just until we turned 18. Lila must have been listening from the hallway because she came in and asked Olivia, "If that happens, can we call you Mom?" Olivia's eyes got watery, and she said in a quiet voice, "Whenever you're ready." Lila hugged her so hard that Olivia almost fell off her chair. 6 months after we'd been taken from Grandma's house, we had a big family team meeting at the social services building. Maya, the judge's representative, our therapist, and Grandma joined by video call on Maya's laptop. Grandma looked different on the screen, healthier somehow, with her hair done nicely and wearing regular clothes instead of her usual prayer robes. When she spoke, she said, "I understand my grief over Mom made me do things that hurt you. I want what's best for you, even if that means not living with me." The therapist on her end nodded like this was a big breakthrough. At the next court hearing, the judge reviewed everything, reading through Maya's reports, the medical records, and Grandma's progress in therapy before extending her foster placement with Olivia for another 6 months. Grandma could have monthly supervised visits if she wanted and call us once a week on Sunday afternoons. Plus, she had to continue therapy and take a class about childhood asthma to understand Lila's medical needs. Maya said it wasn't perfect, but it was movement in the right direction. I noticed she didn't mention anything about us going back to live with Grandma. The next month, Lila signed up for the school talent show and practiced singing this song from a movie every single day until Olivia and I knew all the words by heart. On the night of the show, Lila stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and sang the whole song without getting winded once, hitting all the high notes that would have left her gasping before. Grandma came to the supervised visit the next day and told Lila she was proud of her. She didn't add anything about how Mom would have been proud too, or how God gave her that voice, which her therapist said showed Grandma was learning to separate her grief from our daily lives. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail saying I'd been accepted to a summer program at the medical school for high school students interested in healthcare careers. The letter mentioned that my essay about saving Lila from strep throat had made the selection committee pay attention. Olivia spent hours on the phone figuring out transportation and schedules for my summer program, treating it like I was her actual kid getting into something important. She even bought me new notebooks and pens, laying them out neatly on my desk like it was the first day of school. Maya called one afternoon to tell us that Grandma had graduated from both her parenting class and the medical education course about asthma. She wanted to show us her certificates at the next visit. When we met at the supervised visit location, Grandma pulled out a notebook full of notes she'd taken about asthma triggers, peak flow meters, and controller versus rescue medications. She knew the actual names of Lila's medicines. Instead of calling them poison, she highlighted sections about how untreated asthma could cause permanent lung damage and had written, "I'm sorry," in the margin next to it. A whole year after that night with the sirens, the police, and Grandma calling social services on us, we met her at a park for our first visit without a supervisor watching everything. She brought sandwiches she'd made and a blanket to sit on. Lila pulled out her inhaler to take a puff before running to the playground. Grandma just nodded and said, "That was smart thinking to prevent an attack during exercise." We walked back to Olivia's car and Lila ran ahead to buckle herself in while Grandma squeezed my shoulder and got into her own car. That night at dinner, Olivia pulled out a thick folder and spread papers across the kitchen table. She explained that these were adoption forms and asked if we wanted to make this permanent. Lila jumped up so fast her chair fell backward, throwing her arms around Olivia's neck. I signed my name on every line Olivia pointed to while my hand shook a little. Maya called the next morning to say Grandma had already told her she wouldn't fight the adoption. She understood now that being our grandmother didn't mean she had to be our guardian. The relief hit me so hard I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. 2 weeks later, Lila got invited to her first sleepover at her friend Amelia's house. Olivia spent 20 minutes on the phone with Amelia's mom explaining Lila's asthma medications. She packed Lila's inhaler in a special bag with written instructions about when to use it. Lila came home the next afternoon bouncing around the living room, talking nonstop about movies and popcorn. She'd used her inhaler twice during the night, and nobody made a big deal about it. 3 months passed with court dates, home visits, and more paperwork than I knew existed. Grandma called one Sunday afternoon and asked if she could come to my graduation next year. She promised she would follow every single one of Olivia's rules about medical stuff. Lila and I sat on the porch for an hour, talking about whether we were ready for that. I said it felt weird, trusting her after everything, and Lila nodded, her legs swinging off the porch step. "She's still our grandmother," she said softly, "even if she can't raise us anymore." I agreed. The adoption hearing happened on a Thursday morning in May at the courthouse downtown. The judge read through all the reports while we sat in the uncomfortable wooden chairs. He asked Lila and me if this was what we wanted, and we both said yes immediately. He signed the final papers and said we were officially Scots now. Olivia cried and hugged us both, and Maya snapped pictures with her phone. Lila buried her face in Olivia's shoulder, and I could feel her shaking with excitement. That Saturday, we had a small party in Olivia's backyard. Iris came with balloons, and Maya brought her kids, who ran around playing with Lila. Even our therapist stopped by to congratulate us and eat cake. Grandma sent a card with a photo album she'd been keeping in her closet. I flipped through it with Lila. There were pictures of Mom from when she was our age and younger. Lila whispered, "She's trying, I think," and I nodded silently. Lila started running with some girls from school who were forming a track team. The coach said she needed a physical first, so Olivia took her to the doctor. They did lung function tests and said Lila could absolutely run track with her medications. At her first meet, I watched her run the 800-meter race without stopping once. She came in third place, but she was breathing normally at the finish line. Olivia yelled louder than any other parent in the stands, waving her arms and clapping. I laughed, proud and relieved at the same time. Grandma started coming for Sunday dinner once a month after that. She brought apple pie from the bakery and told stories about Mom's childhood. She took her blood pressure pills right at the table without saying anything negative. Lila laughed at everything and painted her nails different colors every week. She had friends calling the house every afternoon, and her grades went from C's to A's. She could sing in choir without getting winded and run a mile in PE class. I got accepted to the state college with a partial scholarship for their nursing program. Olivia told me my room would always be mine, even when I left for school. I looked at Lila across the living room, sitting on the couch with a book and her inhaler on the side table, and realized how far we'd come. We'd survived by breaking Grandma's hardest rule about medicine, and everyone's lives got better. Lila, breathe easy and live like any other 13-year-old kid should live. That $20 I stole to buy antibiotics had saved everything that mattered. Dear listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss future updates.